Hello, welcome to True Hoop with me, Jarod Hector, and back from his 2-year book writing sabbatical, Henry Abbott. How are you, sir?
It is kind of a sabbatical. I haven't used
hmm
that term, but
Yeah,
I like it.
we
Yeah.
should use it more often. It's true, right? People like, although some people are forced sabbaticals and others, but
Yeah.
this was a self-imposed sabbatical to finish your book.
Yeah, no, it's been, and I guess there'll be more work to come, but I turned in um I guess 110,000 words of second draft on Valentine's Day. And ooh, John, it's a good feeling. It's
Nothing
a
says I love
good
you like 110,000 words submitted to your editor.
just it's not on my desk right now. It's a little different. It's the first time in a long time that if I wake up with some idea, it's like, I don't have to, nothing,
Right.
I'll just, nothing to do with it.
Yeah, idea is
Like,
not going anywhere because that book's already it's in another editorial process. So now the bulk of the writing's over now, right? Like they may come back with like, hey, this chapter or whatever, can you tighten it up or cut this part out or whatever? But for the most part, the bulk is done.
I mean, I'm a neophyte here. I don't really know how it goes.
Mm.
I know that, the first draft, is their language is so professional and impeccable, just like, love it, life changing, amazing, and a couple of notes, and it's like that couple of notes was like a year's work for me, like literally,
Just a couple
like
quick notes.
they were great notes. I feel the book is way way better now, but
Okay.
like that's my 100% of my experience of having a professional book editor edit my book is basically that. So I'm like, I'm ready for anything. But I do kind of feel like I'm on a journey where I don't know how many mountains I have to climb, but I have
Mhm.
climbed a mountain, right? Like I
Mhm.
summited
Mhm.
one, put a little flag up there, and now we're walking down, and we're just gonna find out what the next mountain is.
Mhm. Mhm.
Hopefully, it's fun stuff like marketing and
Yeah. Yeah.
illustrations are a concern. I got to find an
Oh.
illustrator,
Okay. Cool. Cool.
that kind of
Cool.
stuff. But yeah, yeah,
Drawings.
no, it's fucking great.
We like drawings. Drawings are fun.
Once you're writing like 3 straight paragraphs about like how a hip moves, like you're like, it's probably better for the reader if
Drawings.
we
Yeah, I
show
think so.
this. Yeah.
Even I would imagine the most sort of like let's read medical text journals person probably would like drawings every once in a while.
Everybody wants drawings, but I'll tell you, I'm having a real problem with it, which is medical illustrations are kind of repulsive, right? Like it's just not really. You're not going to stand in a bookstore and be like, "Ooh, give me some of this hip diagram," right? That's just not like so. Okay, you don't want that. And then I have gone down this rabbit hole a little bit with some artists, and like if you draw skeletons, which is one of the ways the information's like can be demonstrated,
Mhm.
it looks like skateboard graphics.
And the skateboarding demo, not exactly your target audience for
That
this
is
book.
also weird. Like it's kind of weird to be like, I want to teach you something very important about your posture and your hips. And like, ooh, check out the guy from whatever, Vision Skateboards. I don't even know what the skateboard brand is anymore, but like, yeah. So yeah, I gotta work that out. That's what we're working on next.
Painstaking work, but no, it is good to have you back. The fans, as I told you via text, have been clamoring. They're like,
Oh,
Rod, when's
clamoring.
Henry
Yeah,
going to be around? I'm like, listen,
I
he's writing a
know.
book right now. It's going to change your life and make you not get injured. So just hang on for a bit. Like,
I did see somebody said somewhere like, geez, seems like writing a book is a lot of work. And it's like,
yes, it is.
yep.
You're like,
Yep.
I can attest to that. He's like, yep, it is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I'm someone who has run marathons and raised children, and like this ranks up there,
Okay.
like this is like a lot of work.
Well, because think about it, right? I mean, no matter how long the book is, but let's say, I don't know, 500 pages, right? But about something like this, right? About this kind of work. It's not just like, all right, welcome to my story about that. Like, you have to weave it together so that A, you don't lose the reader, B, they're interested to keep flipping that page. It's much harder to do that than it is to write a 1,500 word story about something, right? Like, that's a little bit more
That's definitely
challenging.
part of it. I mean, I did, I wanted to get a little obsessive about the storytelling quality of it, mostly because I'd felt like I'd had a career with deadlines that didn't let me quite go down
hmm
that rabbit hole. I enjoy it. I enjoy like, you know, third draft, fourth draft. Like I like kind of refining and refining. Um, So that was one goal for real. I think it does make a big difference to how people enjoy reading it, obsessing over that.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I started this book not really understanding the topic very well,
Mm.
so I had to really learn a lot. this is complicated stuff.
It
And,
is.
I had to go on a real journey of like, wait, is it like this? And they're like, no, it's not like that. And the next time again, I'm like, wait, is it like this? And they're like, no, it's not like that. Like, and so yeah, I had I'm not a science writer and this is a science book,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I had to really learn some stuff, and that doesn't help the schedule.
No, no, no. But you had great people to learn from. Our good friend Dr. Marcus Elliott, among others. I mean, really, it's kind of a book about Marcus in many ways, right? One of the someone we mentioned and reference on this show a gazillion times, who you've read, who you've heard, like, but a bright guy, right? Who really understands the human body in ways that we don't. But like, hey, let's make this stuff plain English so people can understand what it is we're talking
Yeah.
about here. That's a challenge, right? Because you're basically you're trying to translate, right, from Mandarin into English, which is kind
Yeah.
of difficult.
And I kind of see Marcus, like, he goes through life and he doesn't want to be lectury, right? He doesn't want to give long scientific explanations. And so he kind of like, he'll say like, your hips are really important. That's something he might say at a dinner party. It's the kind of stuff he says, right?
Mhm.
But I need to go and be like, I need to
Why
know
are
those
they
on
important?
that. Like I need
Yeah.
I need you to use words like acetabulum and trochanter, right? Like until we get that level of
Yeah.
like shining light around and like understanding it, like I can't really make a book
Yeah.
chapter about this, right?
Yeah.
But I made several book chapters about hips. So it's not a book about hips, but it has hips are big, man. Hips are a big part of
Hips
how
are
we move.
huge. Well, it's interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because you mentioned Marcus and how he has to distill the information down, right? Because if he's talking to NBA player X, he can't say, well, they need, like when David coaches players, right? I can't give you 90. No. Short. What is it? Okay, got it, right?
Yeah.
But you say, okay, that's good for me to contextualize so I know what you're saying, but I need it much longer to fit a whole chapter, why it's important, right? And that challenge is difficult.
I'll tell you, there's another problem, which is, this is kind of about biomechanics, and look up like biomechanics terms, and like the words that we have settled on to describe human movement
Mhm.
are the worst words. Like it's like adductor and abductor
Yes.
have opposite meanings. Like
But
who
it's
the
too close
fuck would
together.
design it that way?
Correct.
Like
Correct.
it's designed to confuse people. Like there's every single word of these is like not intuitive, right? And distill. It just goes on and on. Like so, like almost everything that is like an accurate description of human movement is one of those words combined with an obscure anatomy term. You know what I mean? So it's like that's a. I did so much Googling, Jarod.
Well, it is so funny because, if you've ever worked out with a personal trainer or anything like that, they may mention terms like abductor and adductor, right? Like both.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because Shams Charania tweeted out recently about why Kawhi Leonard was missing some gains and it was a strained adductor. And, Twitter's a funny place or whatever. Literally all the comments are like, what the is an adductor? Like,
Yeah.
what does that even mean? Right. And
Yeah.
to your point, it's like, you're like, wait, what does that mean actually? Can you just say, like, he has a strained this thing?
Yeah. Or like nobody wants to say these words. Like we say hip flexors all the time.
Yeah.
That's a plural word. Why is it plural? It's like because it's a whole bunch of muscles with names, right? Like, but nobody wants to say all those names. Like,
Right,
there's like
right.
I wonder if I can name like psoas,
Yeah.
iliacus, rectus femoris. I think is one. There's like a whole bunch of them. It's like even the doctors are like, we're just gonna say hip flexors. Like we're just like this is like it's way too burdensome, right? Like. But in fact, we have to, for some parts of this book, I had to like really understand that. Or another thing that would actually, I love this, my favorite is like someone from P3 would explain something to me with all the terms, which they don't like to do, but sometimes they would, and then I would have to go and like kind of map it out with my own research afterwards. You're like, oh, this one connects here, and then that goes there, and I get it now. Like, but yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff.
And I think it's important because as we talk about the NBA and we're heading towards the All-Star break, which is why David's not here. He is in Las Vegas enjoying some downtime. He is not the All-Star games in Indiana. David's going to enjoy some U2 at the Sphere, some time with his family. These players need a break, right? We always like at this point we're like these dudes are dead, and they and every time you hear like players out with knee this to your point, it's just a short quick thing. It's probably a lot more complicated what's going on with that knee, but I'm just going to say strained knee because it's easier to say. And I think that challenge, Henry, kind of is problematic when it comes to fans understanding what's going on. Because if I say, oh, my knee just hurts, well, just tough it up. You're a pro. It's like, yeah, but strained knee is much more than just strained knee. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a ton of stuff you can play through, right? Like you can, everybody does, right? Everybody's beat up. Like but some things that we're only just beginning to learn about are the real red flags of like, now you're at elevated ACL risk, right? And like
Mhm.
we need to know that about ourselves too, right? Like
Yeah.
there's stuff I do stuff. I actually before today's show, I was doing my like maintenance work I have to do to
Mhm.
stop my body falling apart, right? Like
Yep.
I have a different lineup of stuff than you would have, right? And
Mhm.
um I could tell you the whole book right now, but I guess maybe I shouldn't. But like,
We
yes,
don't wanna give it away.
yeah. I mean, also it'd be just a long podcast. But yeah, there's the I think that we're at a transitional moment where what are the inputs, right? Like it used to be basically like a surgeon looking at a scan would say, like, oh, this looks degraded. And like that's not a good way to know who's at risk, right? Like
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
bunch of people who are great on a scan who are actually at super high risk for a catastrophic injury and don't know it.
Mhm.
And so that's
Yeah.
what they're doing in P3 is they're trying to be like, oh, you actually have this. You might be healthy right now, but you move in this way that is really jeopardizing something. And
Yeah.
like those are the people that, and we're all those people too, right?
For
We're
sure.
all in the same boat where like there's kind of a new lexicon coming of just like how we move and how we should move and how do we keep healthy and how do we keep moving, not just like, you know, physical therapy gets you back to work or back driving a car or back walking, but like they want to get you back like jumping and
Dominating on an NBA basketball court,
leaping
which
and
is
yeah, and just doing
a
exciting things.
whole different set of working skills to get to that point.
Yeah.
And, we often talk about competitive advantage in sports. I mean, that's the whole thing. Most teams, as we know, do in the NBA do a bad job at this. That is the next sort of frontier. The team that can decide that we actually care about the players on this level and want to, that's going to be the team, in my opinion, that really a franchise that has a leg up in avoiding injury, being the most healthy when it matters, like developing their team because they've got young guys they play. All you marry those things together, the injury and the let's give these other guys playing time and work it out. That's the team that ultimately figures this all out and does well in the end.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I mean, regular listeners to this podcast will know that David's always like a little like, not great at player development,
Right.
Marcus has a similar tone
Mhm.
about, like he's not hating on these people, but he's just like,
Right.
they're, they're poorly positioned in
Yes.
as teams to like have these kind of data based advantages because even if they have the tools to like assess all their movement, they have their roster. And like, it's
Or
just
they
not
know how to
enough
turn the
to
machine
really,
on to figure out how to,
yeah. I mean,
you
like,
know.
yeah, like what's a safe range of motion for a joint? Like
Yeah.
you can't learn that from 17 assessments, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's kind of things are changing right now. There's going to be a lot more of this coming, but like, but for the moment, P3 has a giant head start because they've assessed almost 1,000 NBA players. So like
Yeah.
when you go in there now as like a shooting guard and they get, for instance, like how fast you move laterally, they
Mhm.
know how you compare to like the person you're going to have to guard.
Mhm.
So they're going to be like, oh, well, if you're slow moving to your right, like let's work on that, right? Like no one else
Mhm.
you couldn't know that if you were with the
Right.
Bucks, right? Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't have if you're slow compared to your two teammates at that position, right?
Right.
So that's a very, very basic example, but they have a ton more. Actually, so when I was there, they were like, oh, well, you land with this much force here. Um, if you reduce it to this number, then you're out of the injury risk range. Like
Mm.
that second thing they say there, like no
Mhm.
one else in the world can say that.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
there's a bunch of examples, but yeah, it's fun. I find this stuff fascinating,
Yeah.
and important. And I think it like, I since I've been working on this book, I go around and talk to so many people, yourself included, where I'm like, oh man,
You
like
do.
I know a little bit of stuff that might, I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm like, man, we all need this. Everybody's body is like,
Oh yeah.
just
Well, I mean,
needs
you
a little
you
better
you sent me
insight.
a whole workup to do for core body strength and all that to get yourself and it's like, okay, you run, but here's the thing that may help you with your running. And I'm like, this is good stuff. One of my Christmas presents from Henry this year was a something to work my psoas muscles, right? Like I'm telling you,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
but these things matter. Like as you age, I'm telling you, you better make sure that your body's going right. Much less if you're an NBA player and your whole job is to, as David says, beat up the bad guys who are also trying to kill you. Like you
Mm.
better be really good at this.
It does sound kind of hard on your body if you put it
I
that
think
way. Yeah.
so. Uh, Speaking of David, he had an excellent piece come out this week about Jaylen Brunson, the
One of my
Knicks'
favorites. Yeah.
otherworldly point guard. I mean, we talked about him a little bit on the show, but Henry, he's just phenomenal. And he doesn't, as David so brilliantly wrote in the piece, he doesn't have the things that make typically our eyes go, oh, this guy's a really good NBA player. He's not 6'7". He's not super long and athletic, can't jump out. None of those things. but he scores like everyone else who is 6'7", jumps out of the building. And that's, David mentioned that skill is such a huge part of that. His mental toughness, his basketball IQ. He's so good at these things.
Yeah, and so, like if you're trying to learn from watching other players and you're watching Michael Jordan, like it's really hard to learn because
Correct.
he can fly, right?
Right.
Like, and if you can't fly, then oops, it's gonna be tough.
Pretty much.
But you can learn from slow guys, right? Like, and so this part where David wrote that basically like Joe Frazier had short arms, and so he would be under his opponent's chin like all match long. I don't know anything about boxing, but I'm just gonna take David's word for that. And boxers are used to having opponents who try to evade their punches, but here's a guy who's just in their crap all game, right? Which means you're doing something that you're not used to, which is always an advantage for your opponent, right? And so this is Jaylen Brunson's doing that, right? He's like, I'm going to quote David here, but almost everyone tries to jump over or somehow evade the contester, or they contort their body and arm to get a clean look. Not Brunson, whose game says, fuck you, I'm going right through you. Go ahead and try to block it cleanly. And it's like tall defenders just have no reps trying to block the shot of short dudes who do that. Put the ball in their face. And like I feel like that's just think about playing basketball. Like how creepy is that to have someone just put the ball in your face? You're like, like
what's going to happen is you're going to foul him, which they do at a very high rate.
They love
doing
that.
While he is small, and I mean this affectionately, he is built like a fire hydrant, right? So it's not like, oh, he's 100 pounds. No, he's like a truck, and it's very hard to move him, and he's strong, and it's battering into you, and that's not great, right?
I went to a high school game a couple years ago where his dad was coaching, and this guy I was sitting with was like, "Is that Jaylen Brunson?" It was mid-season. He was a Dallas player then, but they were like between games in like maybe Philly and New York, and we were in New Jersey, and I was like, I don't like that guy. This is my internal thought, which I didn't say out loud, was like, that's a fat guy. Like I didn't think that it was an NBA player, right? Because he was sitting down. He was just so broad, like, but
look more like the NFL running back, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just like you, I was kind of blown away at just how, and he was wearing, it was winter, he was wearing several layers, but like I was like, this is, NBA players are so much skinnier than you think they are. Like most of them, they're just like, their waists are generally like marathon tiny, but not that guy. Like I was like, this guy, yeah, hit plowing into you if you're, I don't know, like Mikal Bridges or something. Like
not great.
That's a
I was gonna say, and Mikel's had, I'm sure, plenty of experience with that back in Villanova when they would play scrimmages and play against each other, right? Kyle Lowry, another Villanova product before those guys, but built similarly, right, to Brunson.
Yeah.
I'd say Brunson's got a little more musculature to his body than Kyle did. But right, again, another player, Kyle, who like NBA player, but on this podcast, and I know a plus minus superstar in his prime, right? So
you can make it work if you're brilliant. Yeah.
Gotta know the skill. So that leads us into something you started the document with, which is, all right, if you're trying to defend this dude, like, what do you do? And then it made you launch into, well, who even are good defenders in the NBA right now?
Yeah, I went down a whole rabbit hole here. Okay, so like in the early days of advanced stats, none of the young players were good defenders, basically. Like it just wasn't, this was a veterans game, right? This was all like, I don't know who was a good example. But right now on dunks and threes, like almost every elite defender is in their 20s. Is it every one of them? No. So Draymond Green, no, he's not even in the top 10, right?
He's not top 10.
Yeah. Every single one in their 20s. On offense, almost the same story, right? Steph's in the top 10. Everyone else is in their 20s, including Jaylen Brunson. And then if you go through like almost every category, 3-point shooting, scoring at the rim, scoring there's all the people in their 20s or Kevin Durant. Turnovers, almost everybody has low rate turnovers. That was kind of a surprising one.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, but there's one category where old people just totally reign supreme, which is free throws, right? Making everything around it. Free throw percentage, free throw number of free throws, free throw rate, points from free throws, like all of these things, right? Which made me think a little bit about something Jaylen Brunson is known for, which is just drawing fouls, right? So I think we're in this thing where the game is more about movement than ever. It's more about open space than ever. Defenders now are people who can cover massive amounts of ground, and they have to really use all their muscles and explosiveness and everything, which is hard for older people to do, right? At the same rate as young people. But if you're, I mean, I could, Damian Lillard's actually a pretty good example because as he got to like age 30, 31, his rate of drawing free throws skyrocketed, right? I think that we're watching the games right now. David's complaining about refs and superstar calls. And like, I think part of what's happening is, the refs aren't perfect. But another part is that I think when you really master this game and you really understand how it works and you're really refining and getting to the, and you become someone with a supermax contract and high expectations, you're a little behind in actually playing basketball from what you used to be when you were less famous and younger and made less money, right? So you need to carve out every edge you can. And the big available one, which makes a huge difference to winning, is what I call ref games. You just have to get really good at like initiating a play when you have the ball, or your primary intention is to draw a foul and your secondary intention is to score, right? Like this is stuff that would not work in your pickup game. This is stuff that might not work in college, but this is what you have to get super good at. This is jumping into people and rip through all these different moves, right? Things with legs as you elevate to shoot a three and all those games that happen. I think we're seeing a league where the best brains in the game are on like predominantly older players who are just trying to eke out a little edge because they're not quite at their peak physically, and this is an opportunity for them.
And David would say a large reason for that is because of the reps that those older players have in their brains, right? They've seen referee patterns enough times to know this will work on a foul call, whereas a 20-year-old doesn't have enough reps to know this is going to work on referee X, right? But so-and-so's repping tonight. I know it's going to work, right? Like,
and this is why I think you see like LeBron so irate, because he's like, LeBron's super brilliant, right? Like he has this eidetic memory, and like when he drives left and brings the ball right, and he has this certain defender that he's positioned a certain way, and that guy rakes his arm down, like, and then the call doesn't come. Like LeBron knows, like, you gave me that one 4 years ago. Like I was counting on that, right? Like I don't have that.
Well, listen, that's what makes LeBron extremely, extremely special as a basketball player. It is, but it's all these guys, right? I mean, Luka's a master at it. We talked about Brunson. Harden, peak Harden was a master at it. Part of it also was his ability to break, right? He had the number one break speed in the NBA by a wide margin, right? So when you break, other guys can't break as fast. They're going to run into you. It's like it's like insurance fraud, right? In most states, if you step on your brakes and the person hits you, it doesn't matter what happened. They're at fault because they rammed you from behind. Period. End of story. Same idea here, right? Like, and that's what refs see. Oh, you ran into him. What's wrong with you? Wrong, foul. Okay, there it is.
Well, like the best way to draw fouls is to just be extremely advantaged physically, right? Like Giannis usually leads the league, right? Like because
Joel Embiid.
Once they get and for different reasons, but once Giannis has like that half step on you, like you don't have a lot of options, and you don't want to give those.
Let him go.
You grab him, or you're gonna foul him, right? Is what you're gonna do. You're gonna do something high risk and out of position, right? And then they blow the whistle. So that's the best way. But if you can't do that, and then now you gotta spend a summer with your trainer in the gym working on ref games, right? Like that's where I think it's like DeMar DeRozan. He speaks this language, right? Like he's. I don't know how old he is now. I want to say like
he definitely is in his mid to late 30s, 33, 34 for sure.
Yeah, like, but he's top. He's very high in this, and it's not because he's
34.
Can't keep up with him. It's because he's worked on this, right? Like he's been working on this for a long time. Like this is a thing for him. AD, KD, LeBron, Steph, like they all do this.
No, it's for these older guys, as you always mention. It's the NBA is weird in that the way salary caps work is and the way max contracts work are. By the time you're making the big dollars, you're already worse than you're ever going to be, right? Like than you ever were previously. That's just how the math works. Now, when you are LeBron, KD, and Steph, your worse is better than a lot of other people. So you're like, all right, the money's still worth it. But for everyone else, just about, it's like, this is what hamstrings teams, right? Now we're like, great, we got too many guys making $40 million. We can't play anybody else. And it's kind of the Lakers' problem right now, sort of, right? Where it's like, we got nothing to do. We have no space.
The Bucks and the Suns and loading up on Supermax contracts. Those are old guys. Good luck.
Yeah. And old guys who invariably will get hurt at some point.
Yeah, old guys have some downside,
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And LeBron and his crew, his
Meaning clutch.
known. No, meaning
Oh.
like what they used to. I always thought this was kind of racist sounding, but the banana boat crew, right?
Oh,
Like
Carmelo and all them.
like they were all super influential in the union
Mm-hmm.
as this strange, like LeBron's been on a passage of like that aged player has been
Mm-hmm.
overpaid, right? Well,
Yeah.
they were
Yeah. Yeah.
underpaid
Yeah.
early, way underpaid. But
For sure.
like, I don't
Now
think
way overpaid.
I'm gonna predict that in 20 years this doesn't work like this. You won't have to be old to get a supermax salary in the future. It
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not what the billionaires want to pay for. It doesn't make sense. You'd much rather pay to keep Chet Holmgren than pay to
Mm-hmm.
keep 39-year-old LeBron James, right? Like,
Yeah, for sure.
so it'll change, but I do think that like the weird way they were able to negotiate it, they took a little money from the younger players in their peak and gave it to the older guys past their peak. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
well, just in time for all of them to make that money.
That coincided with Chris Paul being president of the Players Union. Chris Paul, another old guy who,
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, he was on that banana boat. Yeah.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Oh man, so you pointed out EPM and deep defensive EPM in particular, and that most of the top 10 guys were in their 20s. But I did note that at least half of those guys are not starters. And I always wonder, like, because, and we're better at that with advanced metrics now, right? In terms of we know who you're on the floor with, et cetera, who your opponents are, all that. But, if you're playing less minutes and your role is, and you come in, I just need you to like lock this down for a bit, that might, and also if you are not a primary offensive creator on the other end, that might allow you to play better defense, is partially my guess.
Yeah, for sure. I think, okay, so the offensive players who lead the league are like Tyrese Halliburton, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid, Shea, Steph, Jaylen, Devin Booker, Giannis, Lauri Markkanen, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving. Basically, the most famous players in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they get to play because if they were benched, a coach would be fired.
Correct.
Because everybody in the arena knows they're fantastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like Halliburton, not to pick on him, but he's like a very, very bad defensive player. So
He
like
might be the worst in the league.
if you flipped his stats, like he might come off the bench.
Yeah.
Right. If he were super elite defensively,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody gets mad at anybody. If Isaiah Hartenstein, who's the best defensive player in the bench, comes off the bench, right? Like
Right.
Xavier Tillman, Jonathan
Right.
Isaac, Marcus Stewart, Embiid's up there, Evan Mobley, Alex Caruso, Victor Wembanyama,
Mm-hmm.
Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dennis Smith Jr., OG, Draymond Green. These are the best defenders in the league. So I think a big part of it is just like everybody knows his offense, and so coaches serve up offense because their jobs depend on it, right? Like they still, it's not because they don't understand defense or value defense, it's because they don't get in trouble for sitting Alex Caruso or whoever, right? Like people aren't clamoring for defense. They just aren't. They just, and meanwhile, if you have a play, like let's say there's a big crunch time play and somebody is not guarded and the ball is double teamed and it causes a turnover, like everybody's on the coach. Like, why is this bad basketball player out there? On the other hand, as people just sail right on by Tyrese Halliburton, like, and score.
Right.
Very, very few people notice that happen.
Correct.
Right. It's just not a big concern. Or they'll say like, "Oh, this happened with Steve Nash. We understand. You can't have energy for both places.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think it's just. I think it's I think it's what you said. And defense is also just complicated, right? Like none of these players is a great defender alone. Everyone.
Right. Yeah. Team defenses, especially now the way the game is played with it so spread out. Right. And this is a sort of a comment I often make to, for lack of a better phrase, old heads who continually tell me that defense is so much better in the 80s and 90s. And I'm like,
well, that's
not true. Like, you say that. I say, well, that's not actually true. Like, if you actually turn on a game, look at the ground they have to cover. It's the size of a postage stamp. You can be really good when I don't have to move very far. But now I've got to race out to the 3-point line. All this zipping ball, that's really difficult to do. And on top of that, if I'm playing all dudes over 30 years old because they make the most money, I'm going to be bad at that because they can't run that fast and do all that, right? So this idea that like defense is like, no, it's not that. Like defensive schemes are excellent now. The offense is so good. And to David's point about the ref games that you made, and freedom of movement. That was a big emphasis, right? Because look, as you often say, this is a television product, right? What's going to work on TV? Buckets work on TV.
Yeah.
You know what doesn't
You
work on
being bad
TV?
at defense, is that's going to work on TV. Yeah.
rock fights don't work on TV. It's like, oh, no one wants to watch that, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a challenge.
Yeah. And everybody's faster. I mean, like it's measurable. Like they're faster now. Like the person driving the lane is coming at a higher speed than they used to, right?
For sure.
They're stronger. They lift weights. They didn't lift weights when I was young. Like when they didn't like they were like, you can't lift weights in the sport. But it's like, yeah, you fucking can. Like it's totally helpful. You do okay, you know?
Matter of fact, you actually should.
Yeah. Now everybody does, but like that wasn't the case, you know.
Imagine the Giannis coming down the lane and you're like, I don't believe in lifting weights. Well, you better or get out the way because that dude's gonna steamroll you.
You need to quit. Yeah. Yeah. But then there's also like you know, well, the pick on the worst era, it was isolation basketball for like, you know, before Jordan came on. Like, but
Right.
that meant everybody was just catching their breath.
Yep.
You know, and like now it's like nobody ever catches their breath. Everybody's flying the whole damn time. It's a very seldom do you see someone just be like, like with the ball in play, right? Usually it's just flying. Like it's an endurance sport more than it used to be. And you know, I would love to see these guys who talk all this trash and played in the Bird era. Like,
oh, they'd be toast.
Play,
toast.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Toast.
You know? Yeah.
Because I'll tell you what Kevin McHale's not doing. Coming out of the paint to go cover a 4, shooting a 3. He ain't doing that.
No, they're coming to him, right? He's like, and then he's just gonna throw an elbow in their face or whatever.
No, the game has evolved. You know, we always talk about stuff like how do we improve the game, and I know that because of the way the arenas are set up, and you want to maximize the most money, and the courtside seats are the most visible, and all that. But with everyone being so much bigger, stronger, and faster, would widening and lengthening the court help a little bit? And not by a ton, but just a little bit, right? A little more space out wide and a little bit longer.
Oh, it seems obvious to me. Yeah, like you know, and I think we've talked about this before, but like you make more money because you have more courtside seats, right? Like it costs you the back row, but
right.
You know, more money in the front. Like
right.
And you know, I think every single arena has hockey now, so like it means they literally all have room for this. Like it drives me crazy. How often do you see the guy catch the ball in the corner and then starts to drive, and then they whistle it's out of bounds? Like what a boring moment of NBA that is, right? Yep. And I wouldn't hate the idea. I mean, this is pretty radical, but like, you know, like in lacrosse and hockey, people kind of direct traffic from behind the
goal, love right? that. I love that.
It does make it exciting, and like you know, if it were a little deeper, like right now, nobody does that, right? And obviously, you've got 3-second call. You can't like just hang out there, but like, but if it went a little deeper, and like right now, David says baseline is death, right? If you take the ball there, and the defense will collapse on you, and you're in hell. But if there were another couple feet, maybe somebody would make there could be some amazing things happening from there, right? Like
the super smart, brilliant processors like LeBron and Chris Paul would live and feast back there, right? Like
hitting the cutter from there would be highlight material, right? Like
in hockey, they used to call that Gretzky's office, right? Because he would just camp out back there and like, okay, everybody's moving around. What am I seeing? Boom, boom. Like I would love it personally, but you know, we're a little too radical for the NBA, Henry.
They do this thing, and I'm learning a little about lacrosse. I've never really watched lacrosse, but
a sport I played, so very familiar.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, it's all new to me, but I've been watching lately, and like one thing they do that kind of blew my mind was like they put the most skilled offensive player in that Gretzky's office spot,
correct?
Which just freaks the defense out, right? Because like there's already a pick set basically for whichever way, and like the whole game, everyone's just touchy. Because like something's coming from somewhere, and sometimes that person will fly and attack, but often they'll just destabilize the defense, right? Which is like it's pretty fun. It gets a new dimension. Yeah,
that's either your peak attackman, like your point of attack attackman, who's really like can score goals, but is like your assist man, or your best midfielder who's also like two-way, you know, whatever. Like that's where they camp out, and they're just the cutting and the moving. Right, lacrosse is similar to basketball in that way, right? Soccer is similar, right? Like it's just this idea of, but again, no space behind the soccer goals, just like in basketball. Who's kind of camping out and seeing when everybody's going, right? And who's moving to the free space, right? Oh, where nobody is, I'm going to go there. That's where the good stuff's going to happen. I would love it personally.
You know, a thing. Okay, this is a slight detour, but like, I think you'll understand what I'm saying here. Okay, so in basketball, we get obsessed over legal screens. It's a giant part of the game. It's perfectly defined. Well, maybe that's a lie, but like it has a definition, you know.
Yes.
And often someone's like, "Hey, that." Meanwhile, like I know far less about soccer, lacrosse, and football, but they all have screens. And as I'm watching, I'm like, "Well, what is the rule?" And nobody knows. Like it's kind of like, yeah, run over here and kind of get in that player's way,
Pretty
like,
much.
and it's like you are allowed to. Like sometimes in some of those sports, you can kind of grab that person.
Oh
Which,
yeah.
and like, but I'm like, this is a huge. If you're trying to get open in the end zone, if you're trying to like be that cutter that we're talking
Mhm.
about in lacrosse, like somebody's setting a screen for you, but the screen doesn't have a definition. Like it's kind of legal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You can do some pretty nasty stuff, and it's like fine. Like,
yeah,
and that
yeah,
drives me crazy. I'm like, you guys, like, this is like a definitional games turn on this all the
yeah,
time,
for
and you're
sure.
just kind of like, look pretty good to me. Like that's the rule. Like that drives me crazy.
I mean, and people who watch basketball would argue, like, kind of happens in basketball too, right? Who's allowed to set legal versus illegal screens, right? Like,
We're
it's
fighting about like we're gonna hear arguments about like how wide are your feet and
Mhm.
where were your hips and were you moving? These are pretty specific terms.
Yes,
Like in football, it's like I don't. You can just fucking
yeah,
do stuff, but not other stuff.
and
Like
in soccer for sure, it's like you just grab that dude by his jersey and throw him to the ground. Yep, okay.
soccer, the jersey grabbing in soccer is like it's like you have to do it to be good at your
Yeah,
job,
for sure.
and because there's only one ref and you always know
Oh
where he
yeah,
she is, right? So it's like I'm
he's
good
not
here,
seeing anything.
but then it's like, and sometimes it's like on TV, you're like, this is very obvious, right? It's like,
It is.
and you're like, well,
Oh
how
man,
can this be how we play this game? And it's like, well, that just is how we play this game. So get used to it.
them's be the rules, folks.
Not the rules. That is not the
Yes,
rules.
correct. Because there is
Yeah.
no rule.
Mhm. Yeah.
One last note about the EPM. To Henry's point, look, this is basketball's a young man's game, right? Younger people tend to perform better in those stats. People generally in their mid to late 20s. Those are the people who are peaking the top of EPM. But again, I always got to do it. Shout out to the old dudes: Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, LeBron and Stephen Curry in that order. Still top 15 in EPM. Kawhi and KD 9, 10. LeBron and Steph 11, 12, or 12, 13, something like that. But just old dudes still showing positive value on the floor.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I do think I agree with your shout out, but like they get the 50 mil, like
So they got
that's,
to play.
and I do, and I feel a little bit like it gets clouded because every broadcast, every one of those dudes, every commentator is like, that's just LeBron, yeah, what a master, right? They just like LeBron could fall down and like throw the ball out of bounds. Everyone's
Which he
like,
often
that's
does.
because he knows the game, and it's like. Meanwhile, at the same time, like currently, like other players are much better.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
that
yeah.
player happens to be 23, like
Yeah,
they just don't talk that way.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
they're like
yeah, yeah,
oh, like he's really coming around.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
youth
yeah,
is like this like affliction that like ruins basketball players. And it's like that's just an old person talking. That's
yeah.
all that is, right?
Yes,
Like if
yeah.
the commentators were 23, they would be like, no, fucking like Tyrese Halliburton is the best,
I
right?
mean, yeah, and by many metrics, offensively, he is the best player of the NBA, right? Like he's so good.
Yeah, and so I feel like there is this bias, and it hits the referees too, right? Like these old
Yeah,
guys who get the 50 mil, like they are the most famous players in the NBA. They are
yep.
not the best players in the NBA,
They're the
and
most
so it's
famous.
like
Yeah.
they're just a
Mhm.
little. We miss the young ones. There's anti-young bias. I feel a little bit, and so it's like,
Until those young players now become late 20s, and those guys are
yeah,
like, okay, now we love you. Now,
yeah,
now you're the ones who get to do whatever. And then we
right,
miss the 19-year-old, 20-year-old is like, this is just the way the NBA works. Sadly,
yeah. Once they need
unfortunately.
90 minutes to warm up, like now they're famous. Yeah. Like, is that guy still in the hot tub? Where did he go?
Oh,
It's like,
we're gonna get us something about that in a minute. All right, guys, we'll be back after this brief commercial break. Oh man. All right. So one of the great things about when we do these shows with these rundowns, and I knew Dave was gonna be on the show today, and Henry's an early riser, so I was like, oh, I got to do my run. I'm like, I wonder if Henry got into the dock yet. So before I went outside to go on my run, I was like, oh, he must have been up at 5 because the dock's got 75 things in it. All right, we're good to go. There's something that came up, Henry, about ice baths.
yeah.
And I was like, well, this is interesting. Those of you who don't know, I mean, first of all, Kevin Hart, comedian, people know him, has this funny, it's a YouTube show or a little bit where like he gets into an ice bath and there's another ice bath next to him and some other
What's it
famous
called? It
person.
has a funny name. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I'll look it up in a minute. And that person gets into the ice bath and they tell stories, right? And the idea is that, like, well, you're freezing your what's off, like you're gonna be brutally honest in those moments and just talk about whatever.
You're
But
gonna
ice
breathe
baths,
real weird, like,
it's listen. If you ever been in an ice tub, it's fucking weird.
yeah.
And it has long been assumed to be a way in which you stem inflammation and various muscle injuries that go on. But a little tweet came out with attached to an actual medical journal and a report that was done that says this might not be the good idea that we all assume for a million years, that this is just what you do.
Yeah, so this has been an issue that has been like a subject of argument among scientists for a very long time, right? Like a lot of elite athletes really swear by ice baths, and the research doesn't really
Support
back
it.
it up.
Mhm.
It doesn't really back up ice at all. Like the research on ice has been not 100% against, but like a mixed bag, right? Like and meanwhile, it's this thing that everybody recommends, right? And frankly, I mean, it
Well, the
feels
one thing
immediate.
it does do, I'll say this, is it will stop swelling, right? Or bring your swelling down. That's the one thing we know that it does. Now, whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, that's a different story, but it does do that.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that this was Steve Magnus, who I respect the hell out of Steve Magnus. He's a great guy and very responsible with the research. He shared this study that I think is not fully published yet, but it's like preliminary results, I think, that was basically showing that an ice bath right after your workout doesn't help. And the theory is because at that point you've stressed your muscles and they send a stress signal, and the stress signal initiates the like follow-up work that makes you stronger from the workout, right?
Adaptability. Yep.
So it dampens this stress signal, but the stress is what you wanted, right? So there's different reasons to take ice baths, like, and I think a lot of them, frankly, I do it. I don't do it regularly, but I have done it 20, 30, 40 times in my life. Not for that reason though, right? Like I do it because the sort of thing you have to summon in your soul
to do
in
it.
the ice bath is a thing that also applies to other hard things.
Yep,
It's very
for sure.
similar to mile 20 of the marathon, right? We're just kind of like, we're just giving a little mental challenge here. It's like breath holding, same idea.
Yeah.
I feel like these are these kind of like, just kind of proving you can do hard things, right? Works for that, but this idea that you would do it right after your hard workout so that you had some better effect, that seems to not be the way to do it.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the early adages I learned about working out is all that soreness and fatigue that you're feeling. Like, yes, your muscles have been shredded and broken down, and it's adapting now. That's how you build. That's how it builds back up, and it's stronger, right?
Yeah.
And so you are working on adapting, right? So stress is a good thing because it's teaching your body, how do I respond to this thing when it comes. And if you're prepared, you generally respond well. If not, right, generally it goes poorly. But that's the whole point. You are working to get it to respond better and more favorably for whatever the situation may be that you're training for. No, I listen. Oh, let's put it like this. The fact that he's even putting that tweeting out the preliminary studies, I love that. Unlike the NBA, who just told us, "Oh no, rest doesn't prevent injuries," and then had no scientific data that is out there or any kind of follow-up questions to ask about. Well, tell us more. That seems like a major scientific breakthrough. I would love to learn more about that.
Yeah, they did share it with like a few journalists, but I didn't make the list, Jarod.
I wonder why.
Yeah. But I don't know. Hollinger wrote about it. I thought that was very interesting. Hollinger was like basically like, this doesn't look like a very good study. And he's a very reasonable, level-headed guy, but like it's a big decision the NBA is making here, saying like we're an 82-game league. Like we don't really know that players can take 82 games.
That is a huge statement to make, though, right? To say that, oh no, rest. That's okay, great. If that is true, lovely. Tell us more about that. We want to know so much.
Yeah. Remember when Bill Barr said, I forget what words he used, but basically said that like, Trump was exonerated from the big Russia investigation. Like, and then it came out a month later, right? So like we all had this like deep patterning of our thoughts where it's like, oh, there's nothing much in there, right? And then no one reads the whole big long thing. And apparently there was quite a lot in there, but like, similarly, we first learned about this research from Joe Dumars saying that the NBA has science. He used that word, science. It's like, science isn't like a vendor provided you with a review of the data, right? Science is like peer-reviewed journals, right?
Correct.
They don't have science. But no. So everybody was like, oh, no, they got it. They figured it out. I mean, respectable journalists were like, no, the NBA has science. It's like, you just take their word for that? Like,
right.
Like, do any scientists think they have science? You
I
know, like
agree.
none that I've seen. I'm not saying they don't. I haven't seen it. I literally have no opinion on it. But I will not go. I've been around this league long enough to know that they cook up some pretty weak sauce. You know, like
For sure.
they're willing to go with some pretty shoddy.
Hmm.
You know, like we looked into this and trust me. It's like, no,
Yeah, sure. Trust you.
you looked
No,
into it. I'm not trusting you. Yeah,
whatever you say, guys. Sure. Trust us. Sure.
yeah.
Henry, something disturbing happened in the NBA yesterday.
Uh-oh.
Before the Suns Detroit Pistons game,
Oh
Isaiah
yeah.
Stewart apparently got into an altercation with Suns backup center Drew Eubanks and punched him in the face. Apparently, and Stewart has since been arrested and released and charged with assault. The Suns come out and said, there's no place for that unprovoked attack, whatever. That's just what the Suns say. We don't know because the NBA is reviewing footage right now because there's cameras all over these places. So I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of what actually happened, or at least the NBA will. But it made me kind of think, it made you think, like, what? Why is it okay, like, for people to just come into their place of work, and then just start throwing punches at people? It's a strange phenomenon we got going on.
If he'd done it, let's say that same thing had happened, after a hard foul on the court, like 0% chance there's an arrest,
Correct.
right? And I mean, we're all used to that, but on a kind of like, as far as like, if I'm a police officer or district attorney or the governor or the mayor, I'm like, okay, just tell me what the rule is there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a little weird. Like, we're all just like, I know there was like a whole kind of boys will be boys thing, but now we're saying like, oh, if it's in the hallway,
right, then it's
for
not
the
okay.
game,
right?
Then now we're gonna arrest you. It's like, oh, like, so how many yards closer to the court does the law stop applying? Like it's just weird to me. I've seen so many punches thrown in so many games, or elbows, or things that are technically assault, and it's just part of the show. Can you imagine if the police ran out there mid-game and just arrest somebody?
I mean, it'd have to be pretty big police because these guys are pretty big.
Can you
imagine the crowd? No, it's just a strange phenomenon. And look, and I understand, right? This is not, the NBA is not Ernst & Young or KPMG, right? It is not some office with cubicles. Like, if you walk into your coworker's office or whatever and just haul off and cold cock them, yes, you're going, because that's just, what is the context for that in an office setting? We seem to give it latitude because, well, they're playing a physical, violent sport. So, to your point, on the floor, we kind of understand it because emotions run high, got hit in the face or in the private parts. But when you come into the arena before work, like, what? Did you two have beef? What is happening? What is going on here? And it's just, that
latitude. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but like, that latitude is bullshit. I mean, like, it's legally bullshit, right? Like,
yeah.
Like if, like, I imagine that if, a player who got punched in an NBA game sued the city for not enforcing the law, they would win.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Or get settled out of court for whatever. But yeah.
The city can't go before the judge and say, like, well, it's a pretty physical game. We should probably get him dinged up a little. It's like, that can't actually be the law.
Right.
Like, the law, what's really happening is just like, there's a stadium full of people who are okay with it.
Yes.
So no one's going to run out there.
Right.
Unless, like, Masai Ujiri is trying to celebrate his team winning the championship.
He can't go anywhere.
Better stop. Yeah. like, now we'll step in. Like, we can't have that.
Or when fans come out of their seats onto the court, then we're gonna get involved because it's like, well, but what if the fan initiates it? It's a very strange look.
Well, if the player goes in the stands, we all know this is like Armageddon. This is like
an
the
end
most
of civilization
thing ever, right?
Yes.
It just seems so. There's a very strange. I can see why the players would be a little confused. I can see, like, Isaiah Stewart might be saying, like, I don't. He's probably seen. How many times do you think Isaiah has seen someone punch someone in a basketball setting, like, in his life?
At least a dozen, probably more.
So he might be like, "What the hell? And now it's a problem." I can see that. I'm not like defending him. I just think, like,
right.
It is a little weird that he got booked. Okay, it's a departure. Yeah.
Yeah, where we decide to enforce rules and not is just this strange place that we live in. And it is. I mean, you could make that argument too, and I am not siding with him because I think he is always wrong when he does this. But this is probably Draymond Green too, right? Like, where he does this all the time, and he's like, "Wait, now it's a problem?" It's like, well, it's always been a problem apparently, but somehow we let it slide for however many whatevers.
There's like everything's extrajudicial, right? That's how you have to operate if you're going to be in Draymond's job, right? You can't be like following the letter of the law, right? You
Yeah.
just can't. Yeah.
No, it's wild stuff in the NBA these days.
I mean, luckily it's pretty rare, right? Like I know when I started covering the league, it was like everyone was just never fights all the time, and
Yeah.
it's so rare now. I mean, I know we're a little more this year. Like for a long time, the NBA really had like very few violent incidents. It's way down.
Yeah.
And then a little blip up, but like it used to be so. I'm telling you, it used to be so much more.
I mean, we know, like we've watched basketball. I mean, we were fans when we were young in the '80s, right? Like, I mean, there were brawls in playoff series, right? Everyone remembers Dr. J and Larry Bird and the chicken wing being like, oh, I mean, right? Kermit Washington, the famous
hanging
one,
off Alonzo Mourning's leg,
right? Like this was just like, all right, whatever. But there's also this thing, Henry, and we've seen it, like where it's gladiator like, right? Because the crowd gets foaming at the mouth and like, yeah, and it's like, what are we actually doing here right now? Like, is this basketball or is this Hunger Games? Like,
there are a bunch of people who love that. I've never been one of them. I've never find it like.
I agree.
Like I never liked it, but there are a bunch of people, and I'm like, why don't you like go to hockey, you weirdos?
I find it unsettling to be perfectly. And no, it is. And it makes sense because these are combat sports, so whatever. But if you've ever been in, early when I started, doing the internet covering sports things, I went to a bunch of MMA and boxing matches, like big time bouts. Henry, like, it's like we're talking like primitive kind of behavior out in the crowd, like people just like literally frothing at over hits and punches, and I'm like, this excites you? Like you feel good about this? It's bizarre. It's just so strange.
And I'm a super competitive guy, right? Like if we're doing whatever thing, like I actually when we did the train like a pro thing with David years and years ago, like there's a bunch of us journalists, and like I felt like I was just playing normally, but like David went on this whole lecture about like I think I like fought through a screen or something, but like to me it was just like this is just what you do, but to David it was like this guy's a fucking maniac, And he gave a little lecture about it, like in a good way. It was like I got credit for it, but like I like just going all in, but like obviously you go all in to the line, which means like like I remember being like a cross country runner in high school, and some kid just like once you get in the woods, crazy shit can happen in the woods, right? Because there's no referee at all.
Some guy jumps out of behind a tree and tackles you.
But there are places where it like goes from like your 3 abreast and now it's going to narrow, and like how are you going to get down to single file, right? It's like that can get a little wild. The first time it happened, I was like, I was a freshman, and like some kid just basically was like, "Get the fuck out of here," And I remember just being like, "Wait, we can do that?" You know what I mean? Like, if we can do that, I want to do that, But if we can't do that, then you shouldn't do that, right? Like, and so to me, I'm always like, like let the people who want to go really hard without ruining the sport, right? Without like injuring people or whatever. And so to me, I'm like, this is where basketball has been a little frustrating, because it's like I don't think it's clear what you're supposed to do.
It clearly is not clear what you're allowed and not allowed to do. That's very obvious. No, it's wild, man. But such is life. Such as boys will be boys. All that testosterone, yada yada. Well, guys, I think you're on mute. What happened? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now you're back. I was like, wait, what were you going to say? You had like a moment.
No.
Oh,
move along. Yeah,
it is top 5 time, guys. And so Henry knows how this works. You've been around long enough to know how top 5 works. We do our top 5 teams in the NBA right now. You say your 5, I say my 5. We go back and forth till we get to number 1. Okay. The number 5 team in the NBA right now, according to Henry Abbott, is
Pelicans.
Woo! They were in my top 5 last week, I believe. Yeah, look, we said it before. If Zion plays, and he's not even like playing like super well, he's just good right now, which that might be actually a blessing in disguise.
So to be honest, I did this like with recency bias. I literally watched a YouTube video of him shooting 15 for 21 last night, and then I was like, "Yep." Like if he's gonna like, I literally was out in my head. I'm like, "That's a playoff." The way he was getting those buckets, I was like, "This is a playoff situation right here." So I don't really think they're gonna win the championship, but I couldn't.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm with you. And look, we've seen that team do well in the playoffs without him. So if he's to be able to not even do that all the time, but he does like all-star level, or like that's a team to watch out for. My number 5 team the Los Angeles Clippers. Really good comeback win last night against the Golden State Warriors. No Kawhi Leonard. Look, the Clippers, we said it all along. If that team stays healthy, they're just going to be a tough out. They got length everywhere. Kawhi is fucking unreal. Paul George. They're a good team. Harden, Russell Westbrook off the bench. They're a very, very good team.
I think they're like the best offensive team of since when? Like since last couple months,
I think
is that right?
Since Christmas, maybe. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So that's
No,
why
they're
they're
very
my
good.
fourth team. The Clippers are my fourth team.
I like it. My fourth team, OKC. Look, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's probably your MVP right now. And when Joel Embiid was healthy and playing, like obviously he was kind of running away with it, but Shai was having his best season as a pro. We mentioned 20-something-year-olds. Well, Shai's a 20-something, and mid. He's not even like 26 yet, I don't think. So, look, I love what they're doing. I worry about them because they didn't make that move, but they're really, really good.
What if they win it without making that move, right? That's like the biggest show-up thing of all time.
Well, then it's like Sam Price is like, I've been telling you I've been smarter than you motherfuckers all along. Now, look, here it is.
Yeah. All right, my third team is the Cavs.
I don't disagree. Listen, they're fucking 9-1 in their last 10. I mean, they're guarding Donovan Mitchell. David loves Donovan. Is a really good leader. Obviously, excellent player. Garland, Mobley. I love those guys. They're my number 2 team. My 3 team, Timberwolves, still playing well despite their putrid offense. They can guard the hell out of people. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who we mentioned earlier in the show, really, really good defender. And if he's knocking down threes, it's a tough one.
Yep. That's actually my list is like I have a little section that says apologies, and the Timberwolves made my apologies list. They probably should be. They should be on here, but
sometimes,
I didn't.
Listen, it's okay. You get kicked out of the top 5 sometimes. It happens. Whatever.
Yeah. This is my most like daring top 5 probably ever. It's like there's a lot of like unconventional stuff here. Okay, second team for me is the Nuggets, because I just did the game of picturing the playoffs and how it's going to go, and you know that they haven't been like full bore, and like they still have Jokic, and I just feel like it's easy to picture them doing very well.
They're on the highway right now in a car, Henry, and they're going 60. And they're just like, it's fine. Like they're going above the speed limit, but not crazy above. But like, yeah, we're okay. Don't worry about us. The Nuggets are in my apology section, but not because it's just I know what they're doing. We're waiting right now.
Yeah.
My number 1, I said Cavs are my 2. My 1 are the Celtics because they're the fucking Boston Celtics. They're really good at basketball.
It's been a weird season. Like there's not that much parity anymore. Like it was a season of parity for the first 6 weeks, and now it's like there's really one elite team, and there's a little pack of, I think now maybe it's like 6 or 7 teams that are behind them, and then there's like nobody else.
Yeah, right? That's it. Look, the Celtics top to bottom, I just, the way they're winning and everyone who they have on their roster right now, I mean, it's looking like it, especially with Embiid going down, and who knows what he's going to look like when he comes back. And the Bucks, nobody trusts them or believes in them in the East. The Cavs are probably something, but like they're so young and not playoff tested yet, right? Like, so this looks like for Boston, like if they don't do it this year, it's gonna be one of those stories, right? Well, when are they gonna do it? And we know you need luck and all the things have to kind of work out for you. But
saying goodbye to Marcus Smart and hello to Porzingis was like I would love a like super detailed breakdown of like what their thinking was, like what they knew, what they saw. Like it seemed really risky.
For sure.
Smart has been the heart and soul of that team for a long time. They're like, no, we're gonna get this maligned giant guy, and it's just gonna work. And I was like, oh, well. Actually, the other thing that occurs to me is like, maybe it's way simpler than this. Maybe it's just who has Drew Holiday. Like, oh well, you're the favorites.
Listen, you're not wrong, and David and I talked about this. The beauty of having Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis as your starting 5 is they don't have to double anyone ever.
No.
And that, when you don't have to be out of rotation defensively, that is such an advantage. They just don't have to. Like, like, doesn't mean that Drew's not going to stonewall. You don't shut people out in basketball. It's not how the game works. But you don't have to commit extra resources because they know these guys know where to be. We understand the team concept, etc. And that no other team has that advantage where they don't have to double anybody. Everyone has to send help because they're compromised. That's huge. And you see what Joe Mazzulla said? Because they were like, only Tatum and Brown made the All-Star team. And he's like, well, it's obvious that nobody prioritizes winning in the All-Star game, because it was like, why isn't Derek White? And like, well, yeah, they don't, because if they did, those guys would be All-Stars too. But that's not what the All-Star game's for. That's a game that's just about buckets. So, and the most famous people. Only famous bucket getters go to All-Star games. That's it.
When I went to my first one, I interviewed Chauncey Billups afterwards. I'm like, "Was this a good basketball game?" He's like, "Oh no, the worst." Like he's like, he's like, "I hate it." Like nobody's playing hard.
Jokic hates the All-Star game. It's just it's that is not for those kinds of players. It's not their cup of tea.
No.
All right, guys, we will be back next week. We're gonna do a show Monday. You're gonna be on that Monday show because David's still gonna be Vegasing. We'll figure out some stuff to talk about. Maybe we'll talk about soccer on that show. I mean, a whole lot of basketball to talk about. I mean, right? Unless you want to talk about the All-Star game, we can, but I don't want to.
There's always something. There's always something. Like something will emerge. I don't know.
Something's
We're
gonna
talk
happen.
about Mac McClung or something. There's always going to be like.
What if Matt McClung wins the dunk contest again?
Everyone's going to be a buzz about something stupid. Is what happens 100% of the time at All-Star Weekend. I don't know,
It's
some
true.
celebrity thing or a politician or I don't even know what it's going to be. But yeah, we'll be bursting to give our views on something from Indiana. Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week.